The judge was getting paid to send the kids there. A crooked judge who was taking bribes from for-profit detention centers. A teenager that never expected to be in jail ends up there, and he's so shocked and tormented by it that he kills himself. This is a horrible thing. Some kids literally took their lives because of that horrible scandal.
When you say Harris, nobody knows who the hell you're talking about. No, nobody has any idea. Harris. Hey, where's Harris? They know Kamala. They know Kambabla. That was the nickname I used for a while, but I don't use it anymore because everyone thought I was just mispronouncing her name. I wasn't. Kambabla.
Robby Soave on the Rising YouTube channel, The Hill, has covered a story that is probably going to be very much popular in the coming days. Apparently, Joe Biden is probably going to make the worst decision to pardon someone who we all would say, Joe Biden, simply, what are you doing? And a lot of people are not happy about it. Welcome to Cozy Corner TV, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Karen Smith. Call me Q, and we are on the corner. Ladies and gentlemen, we're on the corner with Robby Soave because he has covered a very great topic. A person who our president has decided to pardon or commute a sentence, and people are not happy about it, especially Pennsylvania's Governor Josh Shapiro. He's definitely not happy about it. He has some things to say about it, and rightfully so, because as we go through the person whom our president is going to pardon, other than Hunter, who I believe he already has, this is just not a great person to do this. Apparently, it is the judge who was a part of no other than the Kids for Cash scandal. This is a horrible thing. Some kids literally took their lives because of that horrible scandal. So, yeah, let's jump right in and see what Robby has to say about this. Shout out to you, Robby. You always do a great job.
Well, Joe Biden's unprecedented move to pardon his son, Hunter Biden, for any and all crimes he committed or may have committed for the last decade could go down in history as one of the worst decisions he ever made during his presidency. Now, if in the next few weeks he preemptively pardons, say, Anthony Fauci, just to stop Republicans from examining whether the doctor is criminally liable for COVID-19's origins, or lied to Congress about what he knew, that would be...
So my car insurance...
And there is some talk about that. There is some talk about there being pardoning taking place for Fauci.
It's to $159 though.
Look, check this out. Don't worry, I got...
Which people are not happy about that, but they're thinking that this is something Joe Biden might try to do, really just to cause an uproar for the Republicans. I want to say he's not being that petty, and he's just trying to do a couple of things before he leaves office, but who knows? It's a possibility.
Worse. But last week, Biden issued a commutation, not a full pardon, although the results are effectively the same, that is maybe not as incendiary as his decision to pardon his son, but it's no less controversial. Indeed, this individual who was commuted was convicted of financial crimes that are far more serious than Hunter's. Now, I speak, of course, of Michael Conahan, a former Pennsylvania judge who perpetrated the infamous Kids for Cash scheme.
So he's a former Pennsylvania judge. So apparently, if you guys are wondering, well, how did this person even get pardoned to begin with? Robby is going to talk about that a little bit, but just to jump ahead a little bit and give some context. At some point during the beginning of the pandemic, I think it was, I believe, or maybe at the surge of it, President Biden made a decision to send some inmates home as a pardon, just I believe to free up some room in the prison, or to prevent like some overcrowding because so many prisoners were getting sick. It was something to that effect, but it was about 1,500 prisoners that were basically allowed to go home. And I don't know if 4 years was the exact term, but I know it's been about that since they were allowed. So they basically have been out of prison for 4 years, basically at home on a form of a house arrest, you could say. And they were allowed to do this, but at some point they were supposed to return back to prison. So apparently this particular judge that was one of the 1,500 that was granted the permission to go home and serve his sentence there, now Joe Biden is not going to send him back to prison. He is going to be pardoned. And this was the judge who was involved in the Kids for Cash scandal. If you don't know what that is, this is a judge who basically, I don't want to say he was being coerced, but he had a deal with some of the juvenile detention centers, and he would basically send teenagers to juvenile detention centers, even if the crime that they committed didn't warrant like prison time or any type of juvenile sentence. But because the judge had some type of deal with the detention centers, that's what he was doing. So Kids for Cash, essentially. Disgusting.
Conahan was among 1,500 convicts whose sentences were commuted by Biden. These people had been released from prison and placed under house arrest 4 years ago due to the realities of the pandemic, but they were set to return to prison eventually. CJ Ciaramella,
Okay, so 4 years ago.
Magazine, writes that very few of these released prisoners have indeed reoffended, and look, if they aren't a danger to the community, certainly saves the taxpayers money, we don't send them back to prison.
True.
But Ciaramella writes that Conahan's crimes were so odious, he should have gotten special consideration by the White House. Now, for those who don't recall this particular case, Conahan was convicted of taking bribes from a for-profit juvenile detention facility.
Okay, a for-profit.
To send kids to juvie, even in cases that did not merit that outcome. Teens who appeared in his courtroom didn't get a fair hearing because the juvenile detention facilities were paying him millions of dollars to send kids there. Now, in 2011, Conahan was investigated.
So essentially, the judge was getting paid to send the kids there. So that's why a lot of them were being sent there for crimes that didn't warrant jail time, because Kids for Cash, it was a for-profit detention center.
Charged, convicted, and sentenced to 17 years behind bars. But during the pandemic, he argued for compassionate release on grounds that he was an older man in prison, in danger of contracting COVID, and thus dying from it. So his release was granted, and he was placed.
So the judge apparently was sentenced to 17 years in prison. That I did know. And during COVID, Robby says that he apparently made an appeal that because he was an older man in prison during the time of COVID, you know, he was basically in danger of dying because of his age and things like that. So he was basically granted that by President Joe Biden, and now essentially they're not going to send him back to prison.
Under house arrest, supposedly until the pandemic was over. Well, the pandemic is definitely over, but Conahan is not returning to prison. His sentence has been commuted. This news has come as a shock to victims of Conahan's criminal actions. Sandy Fonzo, her son, was sent to jail at age 17 by Conahan, and he later committed suicide.
So that's what makes this so heinous to some people, and agreeably so. You know, I did know that there were tragic things that happened because of this Kids for Cash scandal. I'm not sure if it was just one teenager or more than one that took their life. But I mean, when you have a judge that's involved in such a scandal, all the way up until the point where, like, a teenager that never expected to be in jail ends up there, and he's so shocked and tormented by it that he kills himself. Yes, people are going to say there's no way that this judge should ever be let go of, because look at all of the trauma, the pain that he's caused. There were people that literally took their lives because they ended up in a situation that they did nothing to get into. And now you're going to let him out on a compassion plea because he's an older gentleman that could die in prison when COVID started. I mean, well, sir, if you didn't do something to end up in prison, you might not even be in that position, right? But you're there. I mean, unbelievable.
So he's speaking out now, telling the media that Conahan's actions destroyed families, including mine, and my son's death is a tragic reminder of the consequences of his abuse of power. This pardon feels like an injustice for all of us who still suffer. Right now, I am processing and doing the best I can. Well, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro strongly criticized Biden for issuing this commutation. Let's watch his reaction.
So I'll offer these thoughts as an outsider, not privy to all the information he looked at, but I do feel strongly that President Biden got it absolutely wrong and created a lot of pain here in northeastern Pennsylvania. This was not only a black eye on the community, the Kids for Cash scandal, but it also infected families in really deep and profound and sad ways. Some children took their lives because of this. Families were torn apart. There was all kind of mental health issues and anguish that came as a result of these corrupt judges.
Yeah, there's a lot of pain that came from this, you know, and, you know, in hindsight, we look at it and it's like, yeah, it's just, you know, another crooked judge that was in the stand and just kind of hurt people. But it's like, you know, when it comes to the families that lost someone in a way where they committed suicide or something tragic, you know, they don't feel that way. They feel like, hey, my child, you know, my person was ripped, you know, from my life, and now you're just letting this judge go free. And rightfully so, they feel like it's an injustice.
Deciding they wanted to make a buck off a kid's back. Frankly, I thought the sentence that the judge got was too light. And the fact that he's been allowed out over the last years because of COVID, was on house arrest, and now has been granted clemency, I think is absolutely wrong. He should have been in prison for at least the 17 years that he was sentenced to by a jury of his peers. He
Agreed.
deserves to be behind bars, not walking as a free man.
Good for Shapiro for calling out Biden. It's actually even worse than that, though. You note that in the remarks he just gave, he said at the beginning, well, look, I haven't reviewed all the facts that Biden looked at. But Team Biden is defending the computation on grounds that they didn't actually look at the specific facts of this case. That's right. A Biden administration official told Politico, essentially, don't blame us.
I literally thought this was crazy because a Biden official did say that. And they're basically saying that they basically let this judge go without considering the specifics of his case, like beyond whether it fit into a broad set of criteria, an administration official told Politico on Friday. So they didn't really look at the specifics of the case. They didn't take a look at the fact that probably, this was a judge, and this was a judge that was a crooked judge who was taking bribes from for-profit detention centers. And on top of that, this judge would end up sentencing teenagers that didn't even commit crimes worthy of being put in juvenile detention centers, and he was doing that. And on top of that, there was also some children that actually took their life and or committed suicide or probably lost their lives in these places. So they didn't look at any of these specifics. I think because he came out with this compassion plea, they kind of just took it like, it's an older man that's trying to get out, and COVID's killing older people, because that's kind of the way that it was looked at in the very beginning stages of it, so they let him out. It's absolutely horrendous. It's ridiculous.
We're not paying all that much attention. Incredible. Now, by the way, what is occupying Biden's attention these days? Is the president staying up to date on the situation in Syria, the war between Ukraine and Russia, the allegations of mysterious drones over New Jersey? Anything? Hello? Do we even have a president right now? Bueller? Team Biden seems to be spending a lot more mental effort and energy on pardons for key friends, allies, maybe family members, than they are willing to exert on practically any other issue. Oh well. So if I recall, you were also fairly outraged about this commutation. This is a real non-partisan one, just a very horribly unethical thing this judge did that really harmed a lot of young people, and I understand compassionate release and not overcrowding our prisons with non-violent offenders. But this would have been helpful to send a message to people who work in our criminal justice system that you cannot behave this way, because the kind of leniency that he's been shown, he did not show to people in his courtroom.
And I totally agree with Robby. I'm not going to react to the whole thing. I always encourage you guys to go find the video and watch it to give them their rightfully deserved viewership. But this was a completely unethical thing. And I said that in the beginning, not to overcrowd the prisons, non-violent offenders. But is he really non-violent? Like, he himself didn't hurt anybody. But because of his poor, unethical, disgusting behavior in a stand where he took an oath, someone committed suicide and killed themselves because they were in a place where they never should have been, because he was in a place where he shouldn't have been allowed to be, because he was an unethical man. I'm dying to know what you guys think about this. Please drop your comments down in the comment section. Give the video a like so we can shoot it up the algorithm and other people can see these stories and just see kind of like what's going on as far as like, man, just in our world today. It's a lot. The election ended and people were going crazy, meltdowns, and Biden's kind of pardoning people that were like, what are you doing? And the turnaround's coming soon. It's a lot. So I want to know, what do you guys think about Hunter being pardoned? Now this gentleman here being pardoned. There's some talk about Anthony Fauci being pardoned, and again, do you guys think it's because they're trying to ruffle up the feathers of the Republicans? You think they're just trying to like make things harder for Trump when he gets in office? Or do you think Joe Biden is just trying to clean house before he leaves? Please drop your comments down in the section. I'm dying to know. Thank you guys so much for stopping by and chilling on the corner with me. Until next time, guys, be peaceful, love yourselves, love one another. Peace.